السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Anybody remembers where we are? We are at Al-Hijrah. One says. It's nice to know where you are, huh? Huh? We're still in Surat Al-Haj. Okay. Somebody remembered. Huh? Al-Isra? That's the next train. We are 2 trains ahead of time. Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man walah wa ba'd. We have finished ayah number 70, Surat Al-Hajj, and tonight we are going to continue from ayah number 71, inshallah. Ayah number 70 reads, ألم تعلم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم ألم تعلم أن الله يعلم ما في السماء والأرض إن ذلك في كتاب إن ذلك على الله يسير. Haven't you known that Allah knows all what is in the heaven and what is in the earth? All of this is in a book. إن ذلك على الله يسير. This is easy for Allah. So now to understand this, Allah is telling us Allah knows everything there is in heavens and in the earth. And He's telling us that everything of that is in a book. But then He makes a comment. He says, this is easy for Him. See, if you want to write what is in heaven and earth in terms of counting only the things you see, how big a book is this? But then if you want to write down whatever happens in heavens and in earth, how big a book is this? It's huge. Then when we know that that huge, incomprehensible mission is easy for Allah, is this a cause for wonder, amazement? Not when you recognize that the action is done by Allah. Anything that Allah does is amazing, whether you think it's small or you think it's big. But now that we are in the 21st century, 50 years after the computer and technology revolution, and we know that, we can spy on the entire world communication from one office here in Washington. Why should it be difficult for any person to know that Allah listens and hears and records everything? Why should this be difficult? It shouldn't be difficult. So people who deny Allah because they cannot comprehend what He does, they just need to know and look at what we, His creation, are able to do. If you, the man, are able to do this, then imagine your Creator. Of course, إِنَّ ذَلِكَ عَلَى اللَّهِ يَسِيرٌ. It's very easy for Allah. A few months ago, we were talking about recording those lectures. And the brother Yusuf was telling me, it takes a lot of memory to record, because it's an hour lecture a week, and then we have to move it to the computer, and then we have to load it to YouTube, and there's a lot of processing that goes on, but it requires a large memory able camera. Well, now people are talking about manufacturing a very small chip, injecting it under your skin to record everything in your life from birth to death, and then it can be transferred to your children and your grandchildren so that everybody knows whatever happened with everybody at any time. They are using this with some volunteers in the military for the purpose of knowing their whereabouts, their surrounding, what they are doing, to listen to what is going on around them in case they get caught as captives. So if a man's life can be recorded on a very, very small chip by another man from a distance, why should it be difficult to imagine and understand how great and vast the knowledge of Allah is? It shouldn't be amazing. It comes with the territory. If you know what you say, Allahu Akbar, that means He is beyond whatever you think is great. He still is greater. And that's why when we pray, we don't say Allah Al-Akbar in absolute terms. Of course He is. But Allah wants us to compare, because there is nothing like unto Him. لَيْسَ كَمِثْلِهِ شَيْءٍ. So He wants us to constantly compare and decide. When Allah calls, is His call greater, as He is greater than any other cause? Is His call greater? If it is, then I treat it accordingly. I respond to Him first. I give Him the priority. I give Him the attention. I value Him. I was saying this today in the khutbah, that the value we get as Muslims from people is consistent with how much we value the word and the guidance of Allah. As much as we value the guidance of Allah, Allah will give us value. Even so much so that He would take it upon Himself to defeat your enemy by making them fear you without you being scary or anything. And the Quran explains in a way how He does it. It's amazing. This is one of those rare occasions in the Quran that Allah tells us how He does what He does. وَإِذْ يُرِيكَهُمُ اللَّهُ فِي مَنَامِكَ قَلِيلًا وَيُقَلِّلُكُمْ فِي أَعْيُنِهِمْ. Allah shows them to you as a few in your sleep. And He makes you look a few in their eyes. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِيَقْضِيَ اللَّهُ أَمْرًا كَانَ مَفْعُولًا. When they see that you are a few, what is the effect? They take you lightly. And when you see them a few, you could also take them lightly, but no, Allah will create a different effect. When you see them a few, Allah will take out the fear that you may have of them out of your heart. You see, it's the same thing, but the effect is different. They see you as a few, they get arrogant and they take you lightly. You see them as a few, the fear you have of them is gone, and you are able to face them head on. It's a different effect for the same thing. Amazing. Amazing. So, and that's why the Prophet ﷺ says, إِنَّمَا نُصِرْتُ بِالرُّعْبِ مَسِيرَةَ شَهْرٍ. I was given victory, of course, by Allah, from a distance of 1 month walking of fear. So fear gets ahead of the army of the Muslims 1 month distance. Imagine some people are afraid of the opposite army for 1 month. They are troubled. They are afraid. For 1 month they are calculating and recalculating and recalculating, and finally they will be defeated. كم من فئة قليلة غلبت فئة كثيرة بإذن الله. So when Allah says إن ذلك على الله يسير, it doesn't only mean ذلك, which is this. No, it is everything is easy for Allah. Everything is easy for Allah. There is nothing difficult, nothing complex or complicated for Allah. Ayah number 71. وَيَعْبُدُونَ مِن دُونِ اللَّهِ مَا لَمْ يُنَزِّلْ بِهِ سُلْطَانًا وَمَا لَيْسَ لَهُمْ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. And they worship other than Allah ones that Allah has given no power and no authority. There is no power, there is no authority for those idols that you worship. There is no power and there is no authority from Allah to those tyrants that people worship. Those pharaohs, those despots, they have no power, they have no control over anything. وَمَا لَيْسَ لَهُمْ بِهِ عِلْمٍ. They worship ones that Allah has given no power and no authority, and they worship also things that they have no knowledge of. They don't know what they are doing. They don't know what they are doing. So they attribute power to their gods. But when questioned, do they hear you when you speak? No. Do they see you? No. Do they hurt you or help you? No. So why do you worship them? The answer is the same old song. We found our parents doing it, and we are following on their footsteps. Very poor answer. Very poor answer. And it shows both lack of knowledge and it shows extreme case of harmful ignorance. It is one thing not to know, but it is totally another to act on ignorance, because it becomes self-harming. So you may not know that the water in the Nile today has phosphate, right? The Egyptian military sunk a ship that has 500 tons of phosphate. By definition, phosphate carries about 20, each 100 ton may carry about 20 kilo of radiating uranium. Imagine how much is this, and how do you remove this? So now people know, it is all over the news in Egypt. It is all over the news, and it creates a huge chaos. This is water, this is life. Huh? No, it is these days. It is now, these days. So if somebody, after all of the media attention given to this, says, I don't know that the Nile has uranium or plutonium or phosphate, whom are they harming? They harm themselves, because they will jump in the Nile, they will eat the fish, and they think it's normal, business as normal. It is not. So acting on ignorance is certainly harmful. Acting on knowledge is certainly very beneficial. So when they know that those gods they worship do not help them in any way, and insist to worship them for a false reason, where do they end up going? They end up going with the shaitan. أولو كان آباؤهم لا يعقلون شيئا ولا يهتدون. Even if your parents or forefathers do not know where they are heading, you just are going to follow them. So where do you want to go? When you see your dad going to the masjid and you say, I'm following you, Dad, that is knowing that where he is going, you want to go to the masjid. You want to get closer to Allah. But if your dad is going in a wrong place, you just want to follow him because he is your dad? It doesn't make sense. And not only that, in our worldly life decisions, we don't even do that. So how many children of an engineer insist on becoming engineers because their dad is an engineer, or a doctor, or anything else? How many? If this was to be the trend, we would have seen copies upon copies of the same forefathers. It will be only this family all Naggarin, this family all mechanics, right? Doesn't make sense. And it's not practical in life. So how is it that in life, which is very short and very insignificant decisions, we decide for ourselves what we want? When it comes to choosing our fate, why don't we decide what we want? Or do we want to be with our forefathers no matter whether they end up in hellfire or in paradise? The comment here is telling, وَمَا لِلظَّالِمِينَ مِن نَصِيرٍ. Those who are wronging themselves and wronging others, they have no helper. No one is going to help them. And actually, no one is going to be able to help them. Because basically, being blinded as such and acting on ignorance means they don't open their ears to listen. So, hearing they hear not, seeing they see not, neither do they understand. So, in what way do we help them? So the Quran says, فَأَعْرِضْ عَنْهُمْ. Those who reach that place, leave them alone. Turn away from them. Don't waste your time with people who have arrogance, ignorance, and stubbornness. Those are not the kind of people you want to reason with, because they are blinded both by ignorance and stubbornness. Ayah number 72. وَإِذَا تُتْلَى عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتُنَا بَيِّنَاتٍ تَعْرِفُ فِي وُجُوهِ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا الْمُنكَرَ. When our ayat are recited unto them, clear and very vivid, with details and everything, you see and recognize their hatred and denial of what they hear. تعرف في وجوه الذين كفروا المنكر. Why? Because their hearts act in repulsion. They refuse truth. وإذا ذكر الله وحده اشمأزت قلوب الذين لا يؤمنون بالآخرة وإذا ذكر الذين من دونه إذا هم يستبشرون. You see the attitude? If only Allah's name is mentioned, their hearts become repulsive and repulsed. They turn away and they shrink. They shrink. They become tight. That is reflected on their face. تعرف في وجوه الذين كفروا المنكر يكادون يسطون بالذين يتلون عليهم آياتنا. They want to just attack and fight those who are reciting our ayat unto them. This is an amazing exhibition and display of what is happening to the so-called Islamists everywhere in the world today. If you recite the Quran for people to hear the guidance of Allah, and this is their reaction, their next step after frowning when they hear you is to attack you. Oh, he's crazy. He's nuts. He doesn't know what he's doing. He lives in those 14 centuries back. He doesn't live his time. He doesn't know that there is such a thing as computer, such a thing as satellite. He doesn't live his time. He wants to apply the rules of 14 centuries backward on our contemporary modern society. And we are free people. You see, the reason for refusing truth is always a false claim. People who free themselves from being servants of Allah, they end up serving anyone below. They end up serving anything or anyone below Allah, because everything is below Him. So if you refuse to bow down and prostrate to the highest, you will bow down and prostrate to the lowest. And what do they follow? What do they want? They want this life. Their eyes and their hearts are hooked and connected and focused only on what this life has to offer. Their dreams is to live what they define as the best life in the lowest life, but they don't have the mind or the intelligence to look for a higher life. So who is smart and who is not? Is it smart to refuse a better paying job with a better position and say, I am happy in McDonald's? I love McDonald's. 13 hours of work and I make $130 because I've been here for 2 years. Man, you can work for a company and you have qualifications that gives you 10 times as much. No, but McDonald's is close to home. You see, once you start with a false logic, false reasoning becomes substitute logic. When the foundation is wrong and you want to keep standing on it, you will have to make yourself comfortable. It is like a killer. A killer who kills 100 people or more, or 10 people or more, killing for that person becomes like a snap. It only is the first time they get to kill that they cross the bridge. But once they cross the bridge, killing the next one and the next 10 and the next 10 is okay. Until and unless one day their conscience sees something, sees the light, then it starts to come back and account and say, how did you do this? So the killer starts to kill himself, committing suicide. We see this in all oppressive armies that invade nations without good reason, based on false pretense and false reasoning and false logic. Then the soldiers engaged, they go back to their nations depressed, very depressed because of what they have done, that they end up killing themselves. And many of them, they kill their own families. So the punishment here is still obvious. It is tit for tat. You kill somebody, you will get killed, either by your own hand or by someone. So those people who are refusing the truth just because they want to have a better life here, they are like the guy working in McDonald's and he doesn't want to leave it because he doesn't want to leave it. For him, he reached his epic. That is his epic. قُلْ أَفَأُنَبِّئُكُمْ بِشَرٍّ مِّن ذَلِكُمْ. Should I tell you about a worse evil than this? النَّارُ وَعَدَهَا اللَّهُ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا وَبِئْسَ الْمَصِيرُ. Hellfire has been promised and prepared by God for those disbelievers. Those who disbelieve, they have a place waiting for them. And hellfire can consume trillions upon trillions upon trillions of people. يَوْمَ نَقُولُ لِجَهَنَّمَ هَلِ امْتَلَأْتْ وَتَقُولُ هَلْ مِن مَّزِيدٍ. When we ask hellfire, are you full? It says, no, give me more. Give me more. I can take much more than this. وَلَقَدْ ذَرَأْنَا لِجَهَنَّمَ كَثِيرًا مِنَ الْجِنِّ وَالْإِنسِ لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ لَا يَفْقَهُونَ بِهَا. We have designated and we have risen for hellfire a class of people and jinn who have hearts but they don't have understanding. لَهُمْ قُلُوبٌ. They have the faculty to understand, but لا يفقهون بها. They don't use it to understand. They use it to lust after what they desire. They use it for mockery of truth and mockery of prophets. They use it to conspire against Muslims. They are not using it the smart use. It is not a smart use. لهم قلوب لا يفقهون بها ولهم أعين لا يبصرون بها. They have eyes, but they don't see with it. Why? Because it is not the eyes that get blind. فإنها لا تعمى الأبصار ولكن تعمى القلوب التي في الصدور. It is only the hearts that get actually blind, because when you see something, the picture that you get goes to your heart. Your heart compares it like a fast-paced computer with something else, and it tells you it's a cow or it's a donkey. So the record you have matches what you see. It tells you it's your friend, it is your dad, it's your mom. So if the heart is not keeping information, how do you process new information? Against what? It's blank. It's blank. So when Allah presented things to Adam, and He told them to tell them what the names are to the angels, and He presented the same things to the angels without teaching them, they were perplexed. We don't know. قالوا لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا. We only know what you have taught us, but we don't know anything about what those are. So if the heart does not receive the initial guidance of Allah, it gets blocked from whatever follows after. النار وعدها الله الذين كفروا ولهم آذان لا يسمعون به. They have ears, but they do not hear. So no hearing, no seeing, no reflection, no pondering, no thinking, no reasoning. You know what? If a person loses only one of those faculties, they are living a miserable life. Materially, their life becomes miserable. Imagine someone who lives without none of that. So, النار وعدها الله الذين كفروا وبئس المصير, and it is the worst of abode. Ayah number 73. يا أيها الناس ضرب مثل فاستمعوا له. O mankind, a simile or an example is presented, so hear it out. إن الذين تدعون من دون الله لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له. Amazing. Those that you worship, whatever, anything you worship other than Allah will never ever create flies. You know what a fly is? It's insignificant creature. لن يخلقوا ذبابا ولو اجتمعوا له. Even if they get together, all of them, with all the resources, the power, the knowledge, the technology, none. So why is man acting arrogantly? Arrogance of power, arrogance of knowledge, arrogance of possession. Why? Because man is kafur. إن الإنسان لكفور إنه كان ظلوما جهولا. Imagine, with all the knowledge we have, we act in ignorance as if we don't know. And that's why the difference between living as a Muslim and living any other type of life is like somebody who lives with all the knowledge he or she needs to lead a good, clean life versus a person who is living by trial and error. So to know what is harmful, he has to try it. So he gets a piece of phosphate and says, let me eat it to see what it does. Can you imagine somebody eating coal or copper or anything else that harms? You know that little lead in the water can lead to what? Mental disease, mental disorders. But lead is all over the earth. But Allah has made water not to pick it into the drinking water, into the streams. Like iron is all over the place, but why doesn't water draw it into running the streams? Why is water always better when it is running? And it's bad when it is still, because anything still stagnates, including man. And that's why you cannot sit still, let alone for a long time. Your body is not meant to sit still or sleep still for longer than needed. Why? Allah created us all as moving creatures that is aiming at changing the reality and leaving it better than what we found it to be. And that cannot happen if we are all still. If we all do even one and the same thing, then life is not going to be improving. So Allah gives everybody some skills, some talent, so that life goes forward. So here, an example and a simile has been provided, so hear it out. Those that you worship other than Allah, who are definitely less than Allah, dunillah, will never create flies, even if they got together to do it. Listen to the following. وَإِن يَسْلُبُهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنْقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ. If a fly or mosquito bit you and got some blood, can you get it back? Do you even want to get it back anyway? But the ayah is talking about you cannot get it back. It's never going to be the same. Even if you could hold this mosquito and extract that blood with all the technology you may have, it is not the blood it took. It's her blood, with all the disease and the germs it may carry. وَإِن يَسْلُبْهُمُ الذُّبَابُ شَيْئًا لَا يَسْتَنقِذُوهُ مِنْهُ ضَعُفَ الطَّالِبُ وَالْمَطْلُوبُ. You, the seeker of what a fly or mosquito has taken away from you, you are weak, and what you're seeking is equally weak. So here the ayah is comparing man to a fly. In fact, in the eyes of Allah, the whole world doesn't even equate the wing of a gnat. The whole world, with people, planets, stars, galaxies, everything, doesn't weigh in the eyes of Allah the weight of a gnat. Do you know what a gnat is? Ba'uda. ما قدر الله حق قدره. And here is the definition of the problem. They never appreciated Allah the way He ought to be appreciated. The reason they don't believe is they did not appreciate Allah. And that's why they see themselves as big. Superpower, super this, super that, smart this, smart that, because they only think of themselves. They are limiting their view to themselves. So the biggest thing they see is themselves, and maybe the tools and the toys they play with that are completely together are very insignificant and meaningless in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I think it was Hurricane Andrew in the 80s that came on Florida, if anybody of you remembers. It turned C-130s and tanks of all things into toys. The Pentagon's estimate is of heavy equipments alone, they lost $20 billion of those days' dollars, not today's dollars, worth of heavy equipment. Wind. How strong is man? How much man masters? ما قدر الله حق قدره. If we appreciate Allah in the rightful way, we would be truly, fully, full time doing one thing only: prostration. When the magicians who know magic very well saw how Allah has turned the stick of Musa into a real snake, and they knew that it was not magic, they couldn't help it. They fell on their face in prostration. So when they understood what is going on, they couldn't help it. And that's why the Quran says, وَلَا يُنَبِّئُكَ مِثْلُ خَبِيرٍ. Get somebody who has knowledge and then present him with what Allah can and what Allah does. If he knows his material, he will be humbled. Waraq ibn Nufal, the cousin of Khadijah, the wife of the Prophet, radiallahu anha wa ardaha, when he heard of the encounter of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam and Jibreel alayhi salam, he immediately says, إنما ذلكم الناموس الذي أنزل على موسى. This is exactly the same pattern that happened with Musa. If the story were to be told to an ignorant person, would he appreciate it? Would he be able to make an intelligent comment? No. So the rest of the community, whose knowledge is limited to worshipping idols, manufacturing idols, selling commodities, making money, they are not in the business of seeing beyond materials. But Waraq ibn Nawfal was an educated man, spiritually educated. So he understood. ما قدر الله حق قدره. The more you expose yourself to the word of Allah, the more you appreciate Allah. The less you read the Quran, the less you are able to appreciate Allah. And the more you practice what you learn, the more you benefit from what you learn, and the more you appreciate learning and knowledge. But if you collect knowledge and don't practice it, the Quran says, كَالْحِمَارِ يَحْمِلُ أَسْفَارًا, is like a donkey carrying a library on his back. Can he read it? Does it benefit him? So this is what the ayah is saying. وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ. There is a specific way to appreciate Allah. Somebody, and that we hear from time to time from even some Muslims, oh, I appreciate Allah more than you do. You think that your ruku' and sujood and going to the masjid is appreciation? I appreciate Allah in my heart. My heart is clear. المصريين يقول لك أنا قلب أبيض. My heart is white. But Allah decides how He expects us to exhibit and show how we appreciate Him. And we'll hear this in the following ayah. ما قدر الله حق قدره إن الله لقوي عزيز. Allah is the powerful one, the exalted one. And as we mentioned before, Aziz means يمتنع جنابه. Nobody can affect him. You can't make Allah do what He doesn't want to do. Aziz. You remember the story of the Aziz? When his brothers came and they called him Ayah ayyuha al-Aziz. They were happy to talk to him. But could they force him to do what they want? No. They could only beg, but they have to stand away when he says no, no. قال معاذ الله أن نأخذ إلا من وجدنا متاعنا عنده. We will not take anyone except the one that stole what is missing. So Aziz means he does what he wants and nobody can force his hand or influence his way. Allahu ghalibun ala amrih. Inna Allah balighu amrih. You look at this, ghalib wa baligh, the same three letters. Ayah number 75. Allahu yastafi min al-malaikati rusulan wa min al-nas. Allah chooses messengers from amongst angels and from amongst people. So He chooses Jibreel to deliver the revelation. He chooses an angel that we know as the angel of death. He chooses angels to protect you. له معقبات من بين يديه ومن خلفه يحفظونه من أمر الله. He chooses angels to carry the sky so that it doesn't crumble. and He is holding it Himself. إن الله يمسك السماوات والأرض أن تزولا ولئن زالتا إن أمسكهما من أحد من بعده. Allah is holding the sky lest it falls. And if it does, who's going to hold it but Him? Nothing. No one. So Allah chooses angels to do functions. Some of the angels, as we will hear in Surat Ghafir, they just are in the business of praising Allah. يُسَبِّحُونَ بِحَمْدِ رَبِّهِمْ. What else? وَيَسْتَغْفِرُونَ لِلَّذِينَ آمَنُوا. They ask Allah to forgive the believers. We think that being a believer, you are forgiven. But the angels are praying not for those who disbelieve, but for the believers. For what? To be forgiven. So don't be arrogant that you are a believer. Be humbled that Allah has guided you to be a believer. Be humbled. Inna Allah sami'un basir. Allah hears it all and He sees it all. يَعْلَمُ مَا بَيْنَ أَيْدِيهِمْ وَمَا خَلْفَهُمْ. Allah knows what is ahead of them and what is coming behind them. وَإِلَى اللَّهِ تُرْجَعُ الْأُمُورِ. And to Allah every matter's return. Everything goes back to Allah. You have a fight with your wife, you don't have to kill her. She doesn't have to kill you. Take your complaints to Allah and live peacefully. Live respectfully. You have a problem in terms of your faith vis-a-vis those who believe differently. Don't kill them. Live peacefully. Educate them with what you have. Practice what you have. Be a guide. Be a torch that lights. But don't fight. Take your disputes to Allah. يَحْكُمُ بَيْنَكُمْ فِيمَا كُنْتُمْ فِيهِ تَخْتَلِفُونَ. He will judge between you in matters in which you disputed. So ayah number 77, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا ارْكَعُوا. This is a show of appreciation. Bow down. وَاسْجُدُوا, and prostrate. وَاعْبُدُوا رَبَّكُمْ. It's amazing. Muslims think that al-ruku' was-sujud is the only ibadah. But Allah is saying, irka'u, wasjudu, wa'budu. That means ibadah here means something separate and maybe even different from the mere ruku' and sujud. Bowing down and prostration to Allah are ways of ibadah, but they are not all the ibadah we're asked to do. As Allah calls us to pray, to make sujood, to make ruku', Allah calls us to be kind. Allah calls us to be good with our parents. Allah calls us to take care of our children. Allah calls us to take care of each other as husbands and wives and neighbors, brothers and sisters, kin, relatives, those we know, those we don't, to take care of each other. All of these are divine calls. Muslims, unfortunately, have been brought up to believe that the only call we get from heaven is a call for prayer or the call for Hajj. Then it says, وَفَعَلُوا الْخَيْرِ. So there is worship, there is ruku'ah, there is sujood, there is worship, and then there is فِعْلُ الْخَيْرِ, to do what is good. Which means you relate to Allah and you do things for Allah, but you also do good things for people. افعلوا الخير. الخير هو الشيء النافع. Anything beneficial and good is described as khayr. Khayr also signifies much more than just mere goodness, is what is in your best interest. Khayrun lakum, it means it's in your best interest. That's what it means. وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. So it doesn't say افعلوا what is pleasant, do what is pleasant. or do just what is easy. It says, افعلوا الخير. What you do needs to match this criteria. That you measure it according to the guidance of Allah, you measure it against the Quran and the Sunnah, and you find that it is in your best interest or in the best interest of someone else, then you do it. That means you are doing what is khayr. وَافْعَلُوا الْخَيْرَ لَعَلَّكُمْ تُفْلِحُونَ. The last ayah, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. Jihad is a whole subject by itself, but suffice it to say that jihad covers everything in life that requires effort. It comes from the root word jahada, to exert effort or to strive and struggle, whether it is for a good cause or to struggle to fight a bad attitude like corruption, nepotism, all of those bad things that we want to fight. وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ. Don't engage in anything except for the sake of Allah. وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. You see, حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ, حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. It is very specific word. There is something that fits. If the tire of your car is 15, you don't want to get a truck tire on your car. Haqq means it fits. It has to fit. And it has to be consistent with truth as it's supposed to be. Haqq. هو اجتباكم. Allah has chosen you. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ. Allah did not make your deen something difficult. I want to repeat this 10 times. No. I will repeat it one time and you repeat it after me. Allah has never made or ordered us to do something that is difficult. Can you repeat it? Allah never ordered us to do anything that is difficult to do or impossible to do. Can you repeat it, please? Allah never ordered us to do anything impossible. I want to hear you guys. I have something on my ear, so you have to speak loud. Jazakallah khair. Why is this important? Because many of us do not do things that we assume are just difficult, not impossible. Allah says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Some people read this lopsided. They say, if I cannot do it, then I am not required to do it. If I decide I cannot do it, I am not required to do it. But the ayah is saying, if Allah ordered you to do it, that means you can do it. You see the opposite? But many people say, I'm sorry, I wish I could be like you. You, mashallah, you pray 5 times a day, and a couple of days you go to the mosque every week. I cannot do it. Why? You don't live on earth? Do you need a space shuttle to come here? هو اجتباكم وما جعل عليكم في الدين من حرج. There is nothing in religion, in deen, that Allah has made to make it tight for you. ملة أبيكم إبراهيم. This is the faith and the belief system and the way of life of your father Ibrahim. It is a nice way of the Prophet to talk to the children of Ibrahim in Mecca, especially the Qurayshites, telling them, you say our fathers, we found our fathers. Your real father Ibrahim was this. This is what he used to do. ملة أبيكم إبراهيم هو سماكم المسلمين من قبل. He called you Muslims from well before. وفي هذا, and in this book, in this Quran, in this message, ليكون الرسول شهيدا عليكم, so that the messenger will become a witness against you or for you, وتكونوا شهداء على الناس, and for you to become witnesses against people. فأقيموا الصلاة وآتوا الزكاة واعتصموا بالله هو مولاكم. So establish prayer and pay your due zakah and hold on to Allah. هو مولاكم. He is the closest one that gives you all what you need. And He can, and He does, and you know it. فنعم المولى ونعم النصير. فأقيموا الصلاة. Inshallah. Inshallah we'll stop here. This is the end of Surah Al-Hajj. Inshallah next week we'll begin Surah Al-Mu'minun. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك.